and it's a really great to welcome all of you in the room and those of you who are remote this morning. Because of our technological challenges, we will be working mostly with audio and with the slides for those who are remote. But it's of course a real privilege in such a context, if I may just say so, to be in the same room as well. What's particularly exciting is that the business school and CSSH are joining together in this morning's presentation. The director of our Humanities Center, Angel Nieves, the Humanities Center usually runs faculty works in progress on behalf of the college, sends his regrets, and at the same time is very much insisting that he's looking forward, and so do I, to more such joint opportunities. And in fact, it is really nice that this happened. We started last semester in a joint presentation with the Bouvet College of Health Sciences, and so it's very nice to start this semester with a joint audience of both the Moore McKim Business School and the College of Social Sciences and Humanities. So with those preliminaries, it's my great pleasure to turn in just a second to introducing our speaker today. But let me just say maybe a couple more words. Speakers are really generally asked to speak not much more than 30-35 minutes in order to leave much room for discussion. And I think as we enter the discussion, it would be just lovely if those of you who are asking questions just briefly say who you are, so that we also have some possibility for getting to know one another, because not everybody knows everybody always across colleges. So again, just really wonderful to have this opportunity. As you all know, our speaker today is Maria Ivanova, director of the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs. And Maria, I believe in good tradition, by the time one has been at Northeastern for more than half a year, one cannot say new anymore. I don't. And indeed, I can attest to Maria just having made an impact and making an impact in this university very, very quickly. I think the business school, and I didn't interview you, Ravi, or your colleagues about why you wanted to hear from Maria, but I'm just going to theorize a little bit, and then in the Q&A, you can set all of us straight. But I am sure you are partially struck by the ways in which Maria has done so much partnered work in the context of climate change, and has done that with international organizations, especially with the United Nations. And for us at Northeastern, it's just been a major boon to have Maria in a leadership role. She is also one of the leaders of the cross-college university-wide effort to add to our faculty in questions of the environment, resilience, and sustainability. And I know is making many connections across the university in that context. I'm sure many of you have also noticed how often Northeastern News has already drawn on Maria's expertise. Northeastern Global News, excuse me, in really informing our communities, but really also increasingly informing broader communities about the contributions that we at Northeastern are making through our partnered work. But I could go on for a while about Maria's accomplishments. Just take a look at this CSSH and the school website. We really, I think, want to give a warm welcome to Maria and want to hear from her at this point. Thank you. So, you know, we usually don't stay so close to the podium, but it's necessary today.
Well, I will try to improvise as much as possible so that people can hear me in the Zoom room. If there are some difficulties, you can flag. There are enough people in the room who can stop me at any point. But it's really a pleasure to be here today and to have this joint engagement. I wouldn't even say presentation, because I don't want to present, but in a sense, we want to make a case. And I say we, because yes, in this faculty gathering, we're actually welcoming a student, and that is Rachel Dohm. And you will hear more about Rachel's work on plastics in a little bit as I talk about what I've been doing, and the role of At the Time News at Northeastern in connecting us. And we'll make a pitch today. of what we'd like to see and what we'd like to change in the way Northeastern works and the way that we stand for or against plastics. So with that, let's see, there's the multiple technological issues. Yes. So what I would like to talk about today briefly is the problem of plastics, the treaty about plastics that I've actively been working on, the pacts that countries and regions are creating on plastics, and how we in academia can play our part. How do we mobilize academia? And then we'll talk about the potential for partnerships, indeed, with the United Nations, or if we have some time at the end, because these are issues that are happening right now. The plastics problem is significant. It's almost surprising that we haven't heard that much about it until recently, but it is a global problem that is manifested hyper-locally, meaning it is not only in every location, in city, in a town, but it's actually in every building. It's now in every body. We are producing a lot of plastics, but the issue is now even with human health. Microplastics are a significant problem. Microplastics have been found in human placenta, in human blood, and we don't know what the impacts are to human health of these absolutely foreign artificial materials that we as humans are producing. And we as humans can choose whether to use them or not, or how to use them. And yes, we often pat ourselves on the back. I'm recycling. Only 9% of global plastics is recycled. It's probably even less than that. And that with having tons, millions of tons of plastics, often ending in marine waterways, but it is all around the world. It's a land-driven problem that often ends up in the sea. The problem is really, really significant. Ultimately, it is about polymers. And polymers are created by humans. And currently, polymers are trademarked, or they are intellectual property. And we in academia can think about that because we encourage innovation. If you come up with a new thing, we can patent it. If you come up with a new polymer, it is patented. You're getting royalties. And yet that it means more plastics. That means it's even harder to recycle the plastics that are different. And so we have to step back and actually think from an individual point of view to a collective point of view of how do we create open source polymers, one plastic that then can be recycled or can be used in different ways. So there are multiple layers of the problem of plastics that need to be addressed, and that we as academics actually have a responsibility, not only as consumers, but also as the producers of knowledge, because we come up with these new innovative ways and new materials. And Northeastern is really a space, a place where a lot of this is happening in the various colleges in engineering or the College of Science. But ultimately, it is here in the College of Social Sciences and Humanities, and indeed in the College of Business or the School of Business, where human behavior will change. And so it is collectively that we can make a difference. And this is why I'll talk across different issues. And that's why Rachel will tell us about her work and what she has done as an undergraduate at Northeastern and the amazing initiatives that she has led and is championing. So I just want to start with the Treaty on Plastics. I was going to say I'm a political scientist, which I'm not. I'm one of those interdisciplinary faculty that find their place at Northeastern because I'm trained in international relations and in political science and in law. And this is why I've been engaged in this new treaty on plastics, on ending plastic pollution by 2040. It started in January of 2022. We're now November. After then, the resolution was passed in March to start a new treaty. And I had the privilege, the honor to serve on the delegation of Rwanda, which was supposed to be the next slide, but now it's not moving forward. So I don't know, batteries might be out, Tanya. There we go. There we go. Ah, there. Rachel will do it. So in March of 2022 in Nairobi, governments gathered to discuss and commit to a new treaty to end plastic pollution by 2040. It was led by two small states, Rwanda and Peru. It was not the European Union. It was not the United States. It was not China or India. It was two very small states, Peru and Rwanda. Until then, until March of 2022, most of the discussions on plastics were about marine pollution. And this is what we have been exposed to a lot. The turtles with the straw in their nostril, the fish with plastic in their stomachs. And all of the resolutions and the documents of international law within the UN Environment Program, which is what I call the anchor institution for the global environment, were about marine plastics. Until Rwanda came in and said, listen, we're a small state in Central East Africa, a very small state with no marine borders whatsoever. We have banned plastic bags. Indeed, in Rwanda, you go to prison if you bring in plastic bags, and it's for real. No plastic bags, no single-use plastics. And they said, but we don't have an ocean, we don't have a coast. So that international law will exclude us completely. Let's create a law to ban plastic pollution, period, whether it's on land or whether it's in the ocean. And that's what Rwanda led together with Peru, which has an ocean, a coast. Well, Peru now has difficulties, political difficulties, government difficulties, Rwanda, and that's a whole other discussion about social sciences and humanities and what happens when the government falls, right? But so Rwanda invited me to serve on their delegation. That was in March 2022. I was the only academic on a government delegation. I'm not Rwandan. I'm Bulgarian and US citizen, but I served on the delegation of Rwanda, which was an innovation on the part of the government to say, you know what, it doesn't matter what your citizenship is, come and advise, because this was the first time that Rwanda was actually negotiating in this setting at the UN Environment Program. And that happens to be the organization that I have studied for the past, I don't know, decades. And so this is how I ended up on the delegation of Rwanda and continuously working with them. But I'm be happy to talk about Rwanda a little bit more and my work there since 2018, because I brought a group of students from UMass Boston when I was teaching there to Rwanda, and we continue that collaboration with the government. Oh, it's not working? Okay, so then so in terms of the global governance of plastics, we talk about the root causes of the problem, and that is the overproduction of this artificial, totally human created material. None of plastics is natural. It is completely human created. And we are overproducing it, especially for single use. And we saw what happened during the pandemic. I mean, it's all about plastics. And yes, some of it is absolutely critical, but a lot of it we can live without. And a lot of the issues are the export of plastics. So yes, we think we are recycling. Do we know what happens to that? It's usually exported for recycling to the rest of the world, whether it is China, whether it is Indonesia, whether it's Vietnam. The plastics that we think is being recycled is actually shipped on a long freight ship to the rest of the world, until China said, no, we're not going to take your plastic. We're banning the trade in plastic. And then the United States said, oh, what are we going to do? And so it's a real significant problem. And it's actually trade and consumption. So the fact that we have both the business school and the College of Social Sciences and Humanities here is really telling that all of us need to work together to resolve this. And there is no global oversight. There is no global body, and thus the need for a treaty. The discussions about how a treaty can be created, how it should look like, are really important, really significant. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of conflict. Is this a treaty that is voluntary, is led by countries, or is it a mandatory treaty with enforcement? And Rwanda says we need a mandatory treaty and we need an enforcement capabilities. And therefore, they set up the High Ambition Coalition together with Norway. And that's a whole other story to discuss also. Norway is an oil producing state. It is extremely environmental, but it is also a lot of Norway's wealth comes from oil and gas. So there is a cognitive dissonance in the entire setup of the plastics governance system. And it goes all the way up to the top. How do we govern globally? And all the way down to the individual behavior. What do I need to actually live sustainably? Let's see, what's next? I don't know my slides. And so the business and policy side, the key issue is the circular economy, right? How do we create an economy where there is as little waste or possibly no waste? How do we phase out not only plastics, but also all of the harmful chemicals that are in plastics? And that's really critical, that plastics is made with chemicals and there are additives. So there are various treaties for all of those parts. And this treaty on plastics is trying to bring it all together. Ultimately, countries will need a fund. Who will commit to what? And how will that be funded? Who will pay for it? And so the negotiation now between businesses, between activists and the plastics industry are ongoing, but academia is somewhat absent still. Let's see what the next one is, Rachel. Yes, so countries have created these plastic pacts. I don't know, you probably can't see that far. Yeah, this is, I can't even see what is there. But the point here is that there are plastics pacts that countries and regions are now creating where they're committing to certain regulations of the plastics industry. And so the United States has plastics pact for North America, and Europe has one. And they're actually very comparable. Usually Europe is much further ahead than the US, but in this, I was really trying to figure it out. Both Europe and the US are committing to measures by 2025, which is not that far away. 2025 is actually very, very near. And for example, the US says undertake ambitious actions to effectively recycle or compost 50% of plastics packaging by 2025. Well, I would expect Europe to say 100%, but they're not. So this is a possible thesis topic. Compare the plastics commitments. What are these pacts doing? How are they changing behavior, if at all? And so Rwanda as I mentioned, started the High Ambition Coalition. This is the minister, Jean Darc Mujawa Maria, who said very recently that I encourage all nations to support the development of a strong treaty. Flexibility is important and necessary in national implementation, but developing national action plan without common obligations for action will not suffice. This is the tension. The United States says, well, let all countries develop national action plans, we'll solve the problem. Rwanda and Peru are saying, let's have common standards, let's have mandatory global guidelines, and then we develop the national action plans to fulfill them so that it's a hybrid treaty. And so what do we do in academia? We have to combine knowledge to develop action. And we are at this intersection of large issues and very personalized concrete action. And this is how Rachel and I met each other. And so Rachel is going to tell you how we found each other and what fantastic work she's doing.
Thank you guys so much for welcoming me here. Thank you, Maria, for inviting me. And just thank you as an institution for empowering me to be innovative and creative. My name is Rachel. I'm currently a fourth-year student at Northeastern. I'm in the process of developing my own major called Sustainability Economics, which will be housed under the business school, but definitely has a lot of cross collaboration with a lot of the colleges. Essentially what I'm studying and learning, and my goal is to figure out how do we build businesses that are not only economically sustainable, but sustainable for the planet. And I actually, I met Maria because a News at Northeastern article was highlighting her work on plastics. And that's exactly what I have been so deeply focused on for many years now. I actually came into Northeastern as a psychology major. I was expecting to study special needs child psychology, but I had on the side this big passion for the planet and for my health. I've been a competitive runner since I was in early high school, and somebody who was very deeply passionate about the planet and my health. And because of that, I noticed a big problem in my own individual life, which was that I, as an avid snacker and consumer of goods on the go, as many growing high schoolers are and athletes, I was wasting a lot. And kind of like Maria was saying, we all are told and have this fundamental understanding that plastic is bad for the planet. I didn't really understand much more about it, but I knew that it was problematic. We see pictures of it floating in the ocean. We see all of these graphic images. And so I was very disheartened that I couldn't be making or choosing any more sustainable option for my packaging on my snacks. Everything was single-use plastic. Everything that you go into a supermarket, you go into a store, you're surrounded by a sea of plastic. And as somebody who was young and wanted to be empowered by the choices that I was making, I was really frustrated that there wasn't any sort of other sustainable solution to the packaging that I saw around me. And so when I got to Northeastern, I took the opportunity to be able to really experiment in the classes that I was taking. I learned more about what the true problem with plastic really is. And this is where I started to research more about bioplastics. And this is a very emerging field, fully basically plant-based materials that can compost. And it was surprising to me that more businesses weren't utilizing this, but this is where I started to learn about the business side of things and the incentives behind businesses to make and maximize profit, but also about how consumers were really wanting a more sustainable change. And so I developed my own company, Rooted Living, when I was 19, when I was a freshman here. And Rooted Living is an eco-friendly plant-based snack company that uses fully compostable packaging instead of single-use plastic. And we also don't use any refined ingredients in our snacks. So they're good for you and good for the planet. It's both home compostable and industrially compostable and breaks down in about 3 months when composted. I'm really passionate about being at the forefront of this research around bioplastics because there still is so much work to be done. And I think that's very important to highlight, even within sustainable businesses like mine. There, you know, we're nowhere close to perfect, but we're getting there. And I'm learning a lot here at Northeastern. There are incredible innovations that are being made within bioplastics, compostable packaging that uses no fossil fuel derived ingredients, really fully bio-based, so that even when it does eventually decompose, when it's composted or even thrown away, it won't leach those harmful toxic chemicals into the planet. And so this is the work that I've been doing and working on, and kind of the work that we've come together to work on together, me and Maria.
Oh, just giving a prop for Lee, say what we can do. Okay. Let's see what's next. Yes. But this is the power of the global news machinery at Northeastern. Rachel and I would have not crossed paths were it not for the articles that come out through the news system at Northeastern. And so it connected us as people who are passionate about these issues, and then connects us to other faculty, to other students. And we're now discussing the campaign that we're going to launch as commencement is approaching. We would like to launch a campaign on ban the balloons.
We just said no to a balloon event in 2 weeks for our prospective PhD student.
Excellent. I mean, okay. But this is the purpose of these gatherings, is so that we actually can make the connections. We can talk to each other and let's see, what can we do that is different? Because we don't need balloons. No academic institution needs balloons to celebrate, and these balloons end up in waterways, on ground, in animals' stomachs. They're actually really, really dangerous. And Northeastern is a paragon, wants to be a paragon of what can be done. How do we make an impact? That's why we have impact engines. And so, yes, we are a little bit radical here, but this is the space. And so this is one way of engaging academia. Another way is to elevate the profile of academia at the international level. And that's what I have been doing with the International Science Council. The International Science Council is the organization that actually has all of the national academies of science as its members. And it brings together social sciences and natural sciences into one space, the International Science Council. And that's where I'm currently working with colleagues from around the world. And while I was the delegate of Rwanda in March to the UN Environment Assembly, in November, in Uruguay, I was on the delegation of the International Science Council, because I'm now the director of a school of policy, of public policy and urban affairs, and cannot be on the national delegation of any one country anymore. It's just, I consider it's not appropriate when it is about the public policy in general. And so therefore, I'm now on the delegation of the International Science Council, an organization with which I work very closely. And that's a space that academia can actually populate. This is something that I'd like to discuss as we think about the new Arlington campus, because we could offer the International Science Council an office space, a seat at the office, and so that we can engage them and see how they engage our students, and our faculty, how we can engage through them in all of these international events, including with the United Nations. Okay, Rachel, let's see what's the next one. So yes, and I mean, I see this is so far, you can't see any of that, but basically what I did is a little bit of research to see what is Northeastern doing on plastic pollution. And there are so many different initiatives here. from the impact engine that Aaron Stubbins is spearheading as a proposal right now, in which I'm engaged, to have an impact engine on plastics on campus, to Rachel's work, of course, to the work of several professors who are trying to figure out alternatives to plastics, much like Rachel was saying, bio-based products that have the same properties, but that actually degrade. And then I hope that there will be more and more faculty who would want to engage in the negotiations. Rachel, the next one.
Maria, we started really. So
Yes, we're done now. Yes. Oh, that's it. I will not talk about my work on the environmental conventions. This was just in case we had time, but you can just, let me just, flip through I have created this index on environmental conventions, just the next one, that compares the performance of countries around the world on different issues. And this is on the Basel Convention movement of hazardous trade, of hazardous waste. Part of it is plastics. And we will add the plastics into this. And we've started a podcast with the UN on transformations, bringing in governments and academia into conversation about how to change the narrative and how to make action happen. And then the last one, as a result of this, yes, I was on Times Square as a transformer. And so I think Northeastern should be part of this movement to transform the narrative and really transform action toward impact. Thank you.
And the floor is really open for questions. And I think, Maria, you can take questions, right? As people raise them. At some point, it might be worth to go for one of you to look at the computer again. I don't know, can you see them, Tanya? Because you could at some point then raise your hand as well. But why don't we start with questions from the room? And as I said earlier, it would be really lovely if those of you who are asking would just be introduce yourselves.
Lori and Ted.
Thank you for that depressing talk. I have a question, and which you're so impressive, which is appreciate the work you've done. And you know, when you said you've been doing something for many years, I said that's not actually possible. But it's really astonishing. I have a lot of questions, but my biggest question, or the umbrella, is about the disincentives. You could talk about the disincentives for something that is such an obvious good. That is, everyone, we would all buy more healthful packaging and more healthful foods if they were available to us and visible on the shelves. We, you know, how absolutely not efficient cotton tote bags are by comparison with single-use plastic bags. We all think we're doing something good, but in fact, you have to live to be 1,007 in order to use tote bags efficiently and to make up for not using. So the messaging is confusing, and you know, one would think that companies would be eager to both do good and brand themselves as doers. So something must be working against the, you know, we can't stand all this packaging. Nobody likes it. So what's going on?
Maria and Rachel, let's take
exactly.
right away as well. And, we'll give you a
And if
chance to
there's some,
answer.
Ted Lyons, Newark School of Public Policy, the Dukakis Center Director. Northeastern is now a major global university in force. We do a lot of procurement, and we make a lot of statements, wide-ranging policy statements about diversity and equality and intersectionality and a range of other things. And I wonder if you had your brothers, what policy position would you like the university to take around issues such as use of plastic, even here in our procurement of lunches, to say nothing of the other ways in which we buy and use plastics across the country.
Anyway.
Yeah, and so let me start with Ted, and then Rachel, you might have ideas for Laura's question. But you are absolutely right. Universities, not only the single university, but the universities as an industry, as a sector, are really powerful because we shape demand. And by shaping demand, we can influence supply significantly. But for us to change that behavior, we need to know how we're doing. And this is what Rachel and I were talking this morning with this new impact engine on plastics. It sets out to estimate exposure, but we thought we actually need to estimate how much plastic we're using. Who is doing that at Northeastern? That's a project, that's a capstone project, that is a thesis, that's a dissertation really. And this is how universities started for climate change. I was a graduate student myself when students at Yale started the audit of how much the university is, how much fossil fuel the university is using and what are the emissions. And then the students produced a report that Yale produces as much as a country like Togo or Burkina Faso. And I think a similar thing for plastics, and it did change the administration of view. And so if we could do something like that for plastics, it would be critical. And here was my plug-in. This is what we did for the retreat that we had at the policy school in September, the first retreat, and everyone who came to the retreat received a set of bamboo utensils. And so this is, you just keep it in your bag and then you just don't use any of the plastics. Imagine if this said the Moore McKim or this policy school or CSSH or Northeastern. We can shape behavior. And also the orientation for new faculty. We had these plastics folders and I went to Jackie Isaac and said, why are we getting plastics folders? Can we please do something else? So it's not only possible, Ted, it's actually necessary, but it will be important. Uta knows what she said, okay, talk to Rick Davis, and we have to figure out who to talk to at what points to make that space. Tote bags.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a combination of people not having enough information on the problem. I think education is so powerful. Once people know and understand everything behind a problem, they're more incentivized to make a change. And so for that example with the school, they're likely people wouldn't have chosen the plastic binders if they knew what the problem was, why there was such a big problem. But something that I notice a lot when talking to consumers is that there's also a lot of shame associated in the field of sustainability. People don't know, like people know they have an impact, but they don't know what they're doing, if it's right or wrong. Should this be recycled? Should it not? So they just don't engage because it's a very overwhelming field. And that's a lot about what I do with my work is I try to make it as simple and easy as possible. And that's why I like being on the business side of things too, because instead of, you see this big problem, this leak, and you're trying to mop up the water, you're plugging the hole from the business side. And then you're able to share and empower people with the education and the information so that they can be empowered and make individual choices. And it makes sustainability correlated with empowerment instead of sustainability, which I think in a lot of areas is correlated with shame and fear and just misunderstanding and pressure on consumers, when it should be a joint act between the consumers. So all of the people at Northeastern, all of the students, all the faculty, but also the policymakers, the people that are making those decisions. And so then they're setting that example.
So how fortunate we have the business school and the policy school. Yes.
Hi there, I'm Kevin Chua. I'm from the business school, and thank you for bringing this all together. Naturally, coming from the business school, I think of this challenge from business perspective and producer responsibility. and I actually research shareholder activism on these sorts of issues. And my question to you is, how can we collaborate? What is the scope of the possibilities here? Because, for example, I am currently engaging with a fund manager here in an investment manager here in Boston, Green Century, who have been targeting Amazon for the last 2 years, trying to get them to reduce plastics in their supply chain. I use Amazon for all my deliveries. The amount of plastic waste I generate as a result of that is huge. So the question is, how can we actually mobilize that? How can we bring the data that we have to be useful for you?
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Bob?
I'm Bob Freestop, professor and chair of the econ department here in CSSH. I'll give the standard, so having from a business perspective, I'll give the standard economist perspective. That's in instances where, for some reason, it's either not appropriate or politically feasible to ban single-use plastics or other plastics that. Would it be possible to impose a fee or a tax or deposit or something that would make the use of sustainable cheaper than?
Chris, I saw your hand.
Yeah, it's Christopher Boxo, School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs. Just a quick observation. One of the biggest users, at least over the last number of years, on campus and single-use plastics was the dining service. And under the previous director, Marine Timmons, they tried a real effort with students to decrease the use of single-use plastics. But just FYI, our dining services are operated by Compass Group, one of the largest providers, and its contract is up this year, and I think we could pressure in those negotiations with Compass to make sure that it decreases the amount of single-use plastics in our dining halls and in also the other dining areas on campus. They already have done quite a bit, but it's, again, the contract's kind of just an important contract to Compass. It's one of the largest contracts in the country. And so it's not a trivial matter. The university has the leverage here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this very much relates to all of the issues and to Ed's question on procurement, because dining on campus is really significant. By the way, that's where I go for lunch, is across the street to International Village, and there, yes, exactly. that across the street. International Village, and I have been quite impressed by the way that the dining services here operate. There is china, real plates, real silverware, compostable bins, and I was very. The cups are plastic, but multiple use. And so that to me was a sign of like, wow, Northeastern is doing things differently and well.
And a lot of it was because of student admissions. So,
Mhm.
lots of it's done, but just as a point of, inflection point,
Exactly.
contracts coming.
But this is something, Rachel, that you as a student can see what are the pressure points that Kevin was raising, that these things can be changed. And indeed on Amazon, and Kevin, I would love to connect and see how you're thinking about this, because I think a really important point would be to connect with the sustainability officers at Amazon. There's a whole set of sustainability officers, and to colleagues in the business school. This is something that I think could position the Demore McKim School in new and innovative ways. If you can train students to become sustainability officers in major companies. My first academic job was at the College of William and Mary. Yes, exactly. No, but absolutely. Yes, yes. But to have it in a business school as we are training our graduates to become that will be very, very important, because there are very few business schools who would say, we do this. There are some, but I think the school, especially in this interdisciplinary way, can really create that. And Bob, in terms of a fee or a tax, yes, I mean, that's what is happening with the plastic bags. And Lori, that's to your question too. Plastic bags are, you pay 5 cents or 10 cents, but even that is not significant.
But
It's
there
not
is
enough.
a fee that income. Yeah, something like that. And then if it's set at the right amount, plastic would still be used in case of work sufficient to do so, even taking account of the cost of pollution. But if it, if there wasn't a real strong case for using plastic, then sustainable materials would be used instead. So this is kind of the econ 1A type.
Any question? The chat? Would like to? Okay, right.
I'd also like to say, like, a part of it is also making there not that even an option to have the less sustainable choice. And this is where I see Northeastern really being a leader, and the School of Business as well. I really liked what you were saying of leveraging students that are doing these types of things. Like, I mean, I think what would be a really great example is you see in all of the, in Wollaston's and the little like places in the dining hall that serve snacks, those sort of things. Everything is plastic based. What if it was all a line of, snacks from Rooted Living that were all in compostable packaging, or from other companies in compostable packaging, but that was the only option. And so being a leader in that way, from the school perspective, where we're only supplying something from a certain standard to show environmental excellence. And then that way, that's the only thing students can choose, and they're engaging in a different way. I think that would be a really great way.
Tina Morano, and I'm from the International Business and Strategy Group at the Marbicam. I find your perspective very interesting, and I'm going to bring the conversation sort of to the sort of policy level, where you were expressing, some insights from the work you've done about emerging markets, governments, and their role in this on this issue. And again, we have the Center for Emerging Markets with Ravi represented here today. So I would be very interested in going back a little bit to that perspective and understanding, well, what's the role of governments? It seems very important, but in this, and specifically when we look at emerging markets, what's their role? Why do they have a stake? It seems that, this is clearly an issue that we care about a lot about in developed countries, but we don't want this to be just a first world problem. We want this to be, a problem that, we address, because some of the worst outcomes probably of the pollution associated with what we're talking about here is going to be experienced by citizens of emerging markets, developing countries. And so given the different expertise that we also have represented here in Center for Emerging Markets, how can we, also continue that sort of line of thinking to which you were alluding at the beginning of the conversation?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Valentina. Is there another question?
Yeah, maybe I'll kind of. So my name is Ruth Aguilera. I come from the College of the Business School, and I'm a colleague of Kevin and Valentina and Ravi and Mark, and Luis. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody else here. So a couple of things I wanted to mention just to follow up on Valentina. I think from the business school, we teach very little about governments, because we focus a lot on how can business help, like it's a partnership. And we focus a lot on this partnership, like, okay, now business has to be responsible. Like, what is the responsibility of the corporation in society? But we tend to forget the business, the state, the role of the state, the role of government. Like this afternoon, I'm in China, so we're going to talk a lot about, all the, right now the U.S. China war, but the effects that has on sustainability as well. But I wanted to mention two things. So we have some work on sustainability chief officers, and the ones, because this is, I have like we have a paper on that, and basically we show that the ones that they are more, it has been growing, and you've probably seen it, but we have been tracking them, and we see that there are a lot more sustainability chief officers, and the ones that they are more legitimate, the ones that they are more effective, the ones that they end up investing more in R&D towards sustainability, etc., are the ones that are more, this is kind of a little bit obvious, but I think it's good to put it out there. are the ones that they're more legitimate, are the ones that they used to be chief financial officers, you know, that they have that legitimation and that they have served on that role, and then they move into this new role. And it's no longer like a, you know, something to look good or greenwashing or pinkwashing or rainbow washing. So that's, and then the other thing now, you know, related from the point of view of the corporation is that in boards also, they are creating these sustainability committees. In addition to the audit committee or the compensation committee, they're also creating these sustainability committees within the boards. And it's also very good to look at which companies are creating those committees and what are those committees doing, whether they're actually, again, decoupling, greenwashing, or they are, you know, doing work. And obviously all the legislation that we have now coming from the EU, but also here in the SEC, I think that's going to be very intertwined. And that's where, you know, what you do here from the policy, government, and then the business. So I really think that it should be super important that we learn from each other, because we know more from the side of business and you are more on the policy side, governments, and, you know, even the international, and we're more at the, and so it's just like a plug for that. Yeah. But, you know, and also like all this research that we all do, each one of us, to really try to put it out there so people can learn from it, you know, and it's like, what is like, how are we going to prioritize, and what is going to be, because when we teach sustainability officers, it's like, what is going to be the rhetoric, what is going to be the story that we want these leaders to talk about in the corporation when they do lobbying, etc. So that's, you know, it's a lot about the argument, the story that you are going to train these people to have based on empirics.
If I could, maybe just to follow up on Ruth's excellent points. My name is Mark Kislip. I'm also from Des Moines, McKinley, and one of the many things we study are inputs, whether it's workforce or finance, supply chain operations. And as you probably know, organizations are becoming much more instrumented all across the boards. They're measuring all kinds of stuff, and they're reporting. There are scorecards everywhere. And I think one of the things we know, and any good behavioral scientist would tell you, that information doesn't drive change. Incentives don't always drive change. So if you know, so just presenting information, you know, one might argue isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. So if you were at Davos or you were working in a room with 50 CEOs, what would the one or two or three things be that you would like those CEOs to pay attention to? What do you want her to know and understand to do, recognizing that there are enormous pressures all across the board? But what's the top of the tree?
Excellent. I think these questions actually really round us up for the hour. And the role of government is absolutely critical. And let's figure out how we actually create some research program together where we could map out government and business and universities, because it's chief sustainability officers and companies. But how can we measure what happens in universities? So to both Valentina and Ruth, this would be a really vibrant research agenda. And Mark, to your point, which actually relates to the others, the number one thing that derives change is not money, it's not power. I mean, it is those two things, absolutely, but they're not at the top. The number one thing is values, is what defines its identity. It's what defines a country, a company, a campus. It is about identity, values. Who am I as a unit, as an entity? And I will just tell you very briefly how I know that for a fact. My first academic job was at the College of William and Mary. That's where I started in 2005. And we started a whole initiative on making William and Mary sustainable. It is the second oldest college in the country, has been around for 300 plus years. And they say we've done things right. But William and Mary was ranked as D+ by Sustainable Endowments Institute, that ranked colleges on their sustainability. The local newspaper, the Virginia Gazette, then wrote, William and Mary cannot pay its bills, it's not sustainable. That's how they taught sustainability in 2006. 2005, 6. And then I went to the provost and said, let's focus on sustainability. Let's make this college a leader. The provost sat me down and said, the pie is fixed, Maria. If I give more to sustainability, I'll give less to faculty salaries, less to internationalization, all issues you care about. And I mean, that's 20 years ago almost, right? And I just sat down and said, Jeff, we're going to bake another pie. And that's exactly what we did. Went back with the students, and the argument that we will save money, that this will pay off in 20 years, didn't hold. But William and Mary wanted to be public, great, and global. It's a public university. It's very small, but it wanted to be public and great, and then says and global. And we said you cannot be public, great, and global if you are not taking care of your emissions, if you behave this way on sustainability, on climate change. And as the students then said, you know what, we're going to change, we're going to bake the other pie. The students went back and assessed a sustainability fee on themselves. They paid $15 more per semester, $30 a year, and raised $220,000 a year for sustainability. And we created a whole set of governance mechanisms that then 1/3 is going to go to research, 1/3 is going to go to operational work and to the students and student type projects. And now William and Mary is a leader in sustainability. But what really made the change was not that it was going to save money. Yes, we created the additional pie, but it was that we were going to match our values with our actions. And I think this now is even more the case. And Rachel, you've seen it in your work that companies want not only to be seen, but to actually do the right thing. They just don't know exactly what the right thing is. So if we could help articulate that to Northeastern and beyond, I think collectively we'll be on the right track. Yeah, we are at time.
I think that maybe maybe still questions afterwards, but I really hope that we will make our value statements here about more collaborations a reality going forward. And it's just really great to see this discussion. So thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Uta, for hosting us, and thanks to everyone for coming. This is the beginning.